I did my first degree, my psychology degree, through the Open University. I was a mature student. And when I finished the degree, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do and how I was going to use it. But I've worked with people throughout the whole of my adult life in an employed and a charitable capacity. So I decided I was going to do a Counselling Masters, and during the course of the Counselling Masters I had a placement in at CMHT, in the health board, in fact, where I work now. And during that placement, it was a CBT placement, I met a counselling psychologist, and she helped me understand about counselling psychology and how I could train as counselling psychologist. And in Wales, still unfortunately, we don't have a taught course, so I did the qualification, the independent route, which worked really well for me. So it pretty much was chance, but actually I realised pretty quickly that that was a good way for me to qualify, attain a professional qualification and be able to do what I wanted to do in the NHS. What particularly appealed to me about counselling psychology was the whole idea of the relational approach. I think when in the beginning I didn't, that appealed to me, but I didn't realise until later on how important and integral to me as a person that is and was. And I think about that all the time. I think about, I thought this was a profession I liked the look of, the training, the philosophy, but actually the whole of me is about relationships. It's something I'm really interested in. I was talking recently to somebody about going on a holiday, and I was thinking, what is it I like about going on holiday? I like to see places and that people have had a relationship with and have changed, and I like to understand about people, societies, cultures, those sorts of things. I'm very curious. And I feel that way about almost everything. I'm interested in relationships, I'm interested in families, I think about my own family, I'm interested in relationships with the natural world. So I have to say it is that relational approach that is interesting, but also a very big part of me. My role as a counselling psychologist is to work in a busy community learning disability team. I currently work in South Wales. Counselling psychologists don't often work in learning disability teams. Mainly the psychologists who work there are clinical psychologists. I work alongside clinical psychologists. I'm actually a lone psychologist in the team, but across the health board there are other clinical psychologists working in the learning disability service. So my role is it's very wide-ranging. It's not about doing lots of therapy. That's where I started, doing a lot of therapy with people with learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities. It's about delivering a whole psychological service. So that might be working with staff groups who support people with a learning disability. I do a number of assessments. We're a lifespan service. I work in an adult service, so we tend to work with people from transition age, which is probably about 16, right up until the end of life. So there might be assessments to make sure that we provide the best service for people. We may even do intellectual assessments to make sure that we are the right service for somebody, and to help us understand their needs better when they're coming into the service. We work with people with mental health problems. I work with people who are showing signs of dementia. I might do dementia assessments. I've set up a service for people with dementia in one of the teams I worked in. I'm trained to do assessments for people with autism, those sort of conditions. I do forensic assessments, so it's really very wide-ranging. But I think what's key is to actually pull the whole thing together and formulate and help somebody in a very person-centred way, very person-centred focused way. I do work with individuals, but I work with staff teams, with groups, training staff teams, meetings. And as a counselling psychologist, what I still maintain is that relational approach. So when I'm working, say, training a staff team, I'm thinking about how they might be experiencing me, what I'm experiencing, what's happening in the room, as well as delivering the information, assessing, helping us work jointly towards whatever it is we're trying to produce. But very much the relational approach is in there. As a counselling psychologist in a learning disability team, you're collecting information from a broad range of settings. Might be using a lot of assessments. You're thinking about what your own thoughts and feelings about working with that person, but you would bring a number of sources of information to formulate. And I'm aware, and I've discussed it recently with a very senior psychologist, how I might formulate a little bit differently to some of my other colleagues, but that's all valued. So it's about drawing on many sources of information. So assessments, but also thinking about the relationship, the client relationship, and pulling that together to formulate to help us understand a client's difficulty. I'm the chair of the Division of Counselling Psychology in Wales. I've done 3 years, which is a term, but I've also gone over into a second term, which will be my final term as the chair. I value that. I really feel honoured to be doing that role, and it is a role that carries quite a lot of responsibility, because essentially, you are representing the views of all the counselling psychologists in Wales. I asked for feedback from counselling psychologists in Wales about whether or not the way I am as chair is working for them, because that's why I'm there. And I've had good feedback that what I'm doing is what's required. So I represent them by going to the divisional, the EC, the Executive Committee meetings, so I bring that Welsh perspective to the main EC group. One of the key things that I see as being chair of the Division of Counselling Psychology in Wales is representing counselling psychology on the Welsh branch. So the Welsh branch is a very important part of the BPS in Wales. One of the key things that we do, the BPS have employed a policy advisory officer, so that's somebody who is employed by the British Psychological Society and is a liaison between the BPS and Welsh Assembly government. So we have a policy committee, and we have the chair from each of the divisions sitting on that policy advisory group committee. I was there when we set that up, and I was very keen that we have one chair from each division, because we're a smaller division, along with health psychologists, educational psychologists, and I think for us all to be speaking and levelling the playing field, if you like, we need that one division, one representative, because there are lots of us in Wales. So what that gives us the ability to do is work through the policy advisory or liaison officer with the government in Wales. So we will look at any policy issues that are coming through government, and we'll think about whether or not psychologists can have a role in advising. So we will liaise in an advisory capacity. Last year we held a roundtable event. The president of the BPS came down, and it was a roundtable event on obesity, which was one of the Welsh Government's strategies. And we we were able to talk with ministers about what psychology and psychologists could offer in the management of obesity. And I think it was, what I found particularly interesting was what people understood or didn't understand about a psychological approach, that it wasn't always a treatment to something that had happened. You can work at an earlier level and it can be much more preventative. And of course, being in that group, I was able to raise the issue of people with learning disabilities because of conditions or whatever may suffer from obesity. One of the things I've thought about a lot, having done the leadership development programme, is actually who I am as a leader and what people want from me and what I'm able to give. And some of the assessments that I undertook it showed that I was a nurturer, that I nurtured people, and I think I know that about myself, which is somewhat ironic because I think asking for feedback from counselling psychologist colleagues in Wales, they're very happy with what I'm doing. So I reflect on that and think, well, actually, am I leading in a way as in, you know, I'm going to go ahead and do this, leading from the front, and I think that is required sometimes, but it's how I synthesise that with my natural abilities as a leader. One of the things that I'm very keen on is succession planning, because I think for me in this role at the moment, it's a natural role for me to be in. I've got a lot of experience as a psychologist, but my time is nearly over in the chair's role, and I'm very keen on supporting people to take over, because that's what's got to happen. It's a rolling programme. That, you know, the divisions aren't they? And I want to support people and mentor people through that process. But it's not always easy because as psychologists we have our day jobs, and finding people who've got the time and the ability to give time to the BPS roles is difficult sometimes. Generally, not many counselling psychologists work with people with learning disabilities. There are probably about 3 of us that I know of in Wales. The reason I really enjoy working in that area is that it's a very holistic service. So you might be intervening on a whole range of issues. It's a lifespan service. I work with adults, you might be working with somebody for their mental health issues, and so that might be the more traditional therapy role. There are a number of assessments and interventions that you might do as a psychologist working in learning disability, and it's about pulling them all together. But I like working in a community. I like the fact that you don't always expect people to come to you. You're taking psychology out to the community, and it's about taking psychology to people. It's being a psychologist in lots of different contexts and environments, working with larger groups as well as doing that one-to-one work. And working with people across the lifespan means that you know, in one morning you might be working in a transition capacity, looking at a young person with multiple disabilities. You know, think about some of the things that younger people with learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities experience, conditions they experience, which can be quite complex. So you might be doing that in the morning, and actually you might be in a nursing home in the afternoon. So it demands flexibility and reflexivity. I've delivered workshops in the Division of Counselling Psychology conferences. 1 year I delivered one with another counselling psychologist, helping other counselling psychologists understand what a learning disability is and what counselling psychology has to offer. So that was quite wide-ranging, helping and hopefully attract a counselling psychologist to come into that area of work. And really talking about how wide-ranging that is, and the opportunity for doing a number of tasks within that service. I've also delivered to the Cardiff conference actually a workshop which I really enjoyed about working systemically with people with a learning disability. So that's working not just with the individual but working the family, the community. And what I particularly enjoy about working that way, and I think systemic working speaks very nicely to counselling psychology. I think it's that relational approach, so it fits very well. But you're taking into account context and thinking about the wider context, which is interesting with people with learning disabilities because there is a cultural and a local context around that. But my workshop at the Cardiff conference was about working with people in the Rhondda, and the Cardiff conference was based in a hotel opposite the castle in Cardiff, and Cardiff Castle was built on coal, and I was working in a community that coal had been very, very important. It had, the whole community had actually been built upon that. And, where do people with learning disabilities sit within that and their families? So it was really interesting, I felt, to be opposite, delivering that workshop in a room where we could actually look at the proceeds of that community. So when you're working systemically, you are working with the person, but you're thinking about their relationship with themselves, with their family, with their neighbours, with their wider community, with the world as it is today, and I'm absolutely fascinated by thinking about that way of working. So that was probably the most enjoyable workshop I delivered. The main challenges as a counselling psychologist, certainly working in Wales and in the NHS, about maintaining our identity, but also maintaining our existence, because I think quite naturally in today's environment, jobs aren't easy to get, and I think that very often a lot of people are going for not very many jobs, and it's about making sure that we are able to apply for those jobs. So that's a lot of the work that I do as chair, to actually raise the profile of counselling psychology and help people to understand that we are employable. No, I'm very lucky. I have a job in a health board, but progression is something that's quite difficult. And in order to develop services, you need to progress and be in a different position, really. And I would like to. I think I work very closely with my clinical colleagues, and pretty much we're all talking from the same hymn sheet, if you like. But it would be good to have more counselling psychologists in more senior positions. I mean, we have got one counselling psychologist in a very senior position, but then fewer in middle management, if you like. And I think it is a challenge, and I think it would be really helpful if there was better career progression for counselling psychologists. As a psychologist working in a learning disability service, psychometrics plays a fairly key part of the work, because we need to understand our clients. And of course, we listen to our clients, we talk to our clients. Of course, those are really the most important ways to really understand people's experience and what means the most to them. But sometimes we do have to capture perhaps more quantitative information. And so I do use a fair bit of psychometrics. We use the Wechsler tests, some of the dementia assessments, and I am always in my team talking about the importance of those assessments, but that you can only use them to be able to formulate and understand somebody. So sometimes other professions will use our assessments, not the Wechsler, but some of the dementia assessments or the mental health assessments, and just count the numbers. What I spend a lot of time doing is trying to help people understand that numbers are meaningless on their own. You need to use them to actually understand the person and think about the person in the whole, and how that extra information is informative in certain areas. So psychometrics, I think, are something that many counselling psychologists use in their day-to-day work. But like all psychologists, use them to come up with a formulation to help them understand their clients and intervene in the best possible way. We do use them, and we're well placed to use them. I work as a counselling psychologist in a multi-disciplinary team, and I think I really enjoy working in a team. And I think we work in lots of different ways. Now we bring quite a valued approach. Psychologists are generally valued in their teams. So we do all the things that psychologists might do. But I think because we're very interested in looking at things in the whole, it's really important that we bring together assessments in my team, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, nurses, physiotherapists, psychiatry. I think that they all have their place in delivering a holistic service to the service user. What I often find myself doing is actually being the person who pulls it all together. And often is the person in the room. I do a fair bit of team formulation because what I see sometimes is that people do a lot of really good work, but we're all sometimes you're doing it in different ways. But what's really valuable is when we bring it together, and we don't so much we stop repeating the same thing happening again, but we bring it together and synthesize it, because it's so meaningful then. So I think that's where a multidisciplinary team is such a valuable resource. I can't actually think of working in any other way. My first degree obviously was in psychology, and I did that through the Open University. I did that whilst my children were very young, so I was doing that part-time. That took me about 6 years. Then I started a master's in counselling, and I think that took about 4 years. Really enjoyed that. I think probably the most valuable year that I had was my first year, which was person-centred, and going from a psychology degree into a person-centred, it was a certificate, was a real challenge, because you had to flip your thinking over. But that was the most valuable thing I did to underpin everything I do as a counselling psychologist, I think. So I did my master's, and then I did a diploma in systemic and family therapy, and really enjoyed that. And the reason I did that, my coordinator of training felt that it would be something that would complement the qualification that I was in the throes of at that time, the qualification in Counselling Psychology. But we've also got a very strong network of systemic psychotherapy in South Wales, so that brings lots of people together as well. So those were my main training. So the person-centred psychodynamic year in the Masters, CBT, and then the systemic family therapy. So those were the key trainings I had as a counselling psychologist.